First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to talk, and thank you so much also for giving me the opportunity to be here and to listen to all these wonderful presentations. I will try not to repeat things that we have been discussing since yesterday, and especially Sophia just very timely mentioned in the previous presentation the results that many organizations and from the UN system, from UNHCR and UN have come up, and I really urge you to read to them. But I will more try to make a connection between the legal framework and the European legal framework and what is actually happening on the ground. What is how does that plays out in the borderline? So I am Greek, and I have been working as a lawyer in Greece for many years, dealing with asylum seekers and refugees and working in the asylum system of Greece, doing research, and also being involved in the practical issues of deciding upon asylum. And for the past year I have been working with Anja Carlsson-Frank in her project about the securitization, internal border control and everyday corruption in Malaysia and Greece. And since this August I have had my own research project doing a PhD funded by the Center for European Research in the University of Gothenburg, where I'm gonna look at the governance of the asylum in the borders in Greece and in Turkey. So what I'm gonna discuss today is the reception conditions for the asylum seekers according to the European asylum system. So the legal framework of what is provided from the European law in terms of reception of asylum seekers and refugees. I'm going to show you a bit of maps and statistics, then discuss the case of Lesbos, and then come to some conclusions. The empirical material that I have come from the project that I have worked with Anja and from my own project, and we have visited Lesbos 3 times during the past year and a half. And we have visited Athens also another 2 times. And of course we have used official statistics and reports. And my motivation and what I think is really important is to see the gap between the policies and what happens in reality. And what happens in reality most of the times we don't see it. It is behind the walls, it is in the detention centers, it is in an island in Greece somewhere that we don't even know exactly where it is, on the map, or in Italy, in Lampedusa, or even more in Turkey. So what is happening, especially since the Balkan route was closed, we don't see it, we don't discuss it anymore because it is outside our garden, our backyard. So that's my motivation to show that the problem is still there, and it has a very strong connection to politics, to policy, what is happening in the European level. So, I would like to pose a question. Are we having a refugee crisis all over Europe, or are we having a reception crisis? And this has like this smaller aspects to it. So, is the crisis the same all over? I don't think so. We are a whole continent of 28, used to be now 27 member states, and not all of them have been affected. There are countries who have not received people at all. There are countries who do not want to receive people at all. And they're the ones who are in the borders, like Italy and Greece, and have no choice but receiving the people and accommodating at best for them, or not at best, but they're on the border and they cannot choose. And there are countries like Germany and Sweden who had the political will to receive people and try to do what they had to do under European and international law. So I don't think that this is a crisis all over Europe. And if we see at the numbers also, we are 500 million people, and we received a bit more than 1 million refugees. If you see what is the situation in Lebanon, for instance, it's 1 out of 4 people are refugees. Then maybe we can discuss the crisis. So I think that what we are having is more of a reception crisis, having to do with how are we dealing with people arriving in Europe. So I would like to start from the Common European Asylum System, which is the overall framework of how Europe is dealing with asylum. then look at specific responses during the crisis, and then give you a bit of examples from the fieldwork I have done in Lesbos. I put this slide on because I think it's important to know what a refugee is, and to know that it comes from international law, and all European Union as a union and all of the member states have signed that convention and have agreed to protect people under this convention. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind. And at the same time, I think that it ties a bit to the statistics we saw yesterday from Migrationsverket, because this is what he was referring as people protected under the convention. And what is happening nowadays is that we have different levels of protection. So people either they get this status, or they get a subsidiary status or a humanitarian status. This has real effects on what they will receive in terms of how long they can stay, whether they can be returned after some time, what kinds of rights they will have while being here, will they have the right to work, etc. So sometimes we see these as legal details, but they make big difference in everyday life. So the Asylum Procedures Directive is as you say, directive, and in European law we have two big categories of different legislation. So the directive means that all of the member states have to put it in place, but they can do that under their own legislation, their own way, their own terms, with their own time. So it's not as binding as regulations. And what is this directive doing is providing for same and an equal treatment of asylum seekers, no matter where they do apply for asylum, either it is Sweden or Italy or Greece or Poland. So what European law is telling us is that we have to have a common procedures for granting and withdrawing international protection. And in that directive, what is very important is that asylum seekers with special needs will receive the necessary support to explain their claim. In particular, there will be greater protections of unaccompanied minors and victims of torture. So we see already that the European law is providing for some special treatment, it's providing for the treatment of people who have needs, who are vulnerable, etc. But this is, in most cases, on paper. And this translates totally different from one member state to the other. And this is part of the reason why people, for instance, don't want to go and apply for asylum in, let's say, Greece, because they know that they will not get that, because the Greek asylum system is falling apart, or in some other countries. So whether this is a very good provision in paper, it does not translate into practice, because still European states have very different asylum procedures and services and ways of dealing with the asylum claims. The second directive has to do with reception, and I think that it is the most crucial one for that particular momentum is the reception conditions directive, because it supposedly it should ensure that there are humane material reception conditions, such as housing, for asylum seekers across the EU, and that the fundamental rights of the concerned persons are fully respected. This has not been the case. This has not been the case for now. It has been more than a year that we say we're in a crisis, and still we're not in that state, although it is written in the law. There are no material reception conditions, and there are very severe breachings of the fundamental rights of the concerned people. And finally, the last part that it says, it also ensures that detention is only applied as a measure of last resort. No, detention is applied for almost all cases, and nowadays it's also institutionalized on the hotspots approach. So, detention in the borderline, at least, is the mainstream. The practice has been the complete opposite of the law. And I want to stress these differences, because as European citizens, we have a say over European law. We vote every 5 years for Euro elections. It's not something that is only happening in Brussels, but it is something that concerns us because European law is above national law. And we should have an opinion and a say on what is in law and what's happening in practice. We have to call upon the people that do not comply, the governments that do not comply. The revised Qualification Directive has to do with the standards for the qualification of third country nationals or stateless people. And it is more about these other categories I was telling you, not the Geneva Convention status, but the rest of international protection. And what they try to do is to make asylum decisions more robust, which means in reality that we have to have common standards of how we judge upon asylum claims when they come in our offices. Either we're working for the Greek Asylum Service or the Swedish Asylum Service or the Spanish Asylum Service, etc. Because that also promotes justice and equality. We have a common set of rules that we have to put in place, and the way that we're treating people should be the same across Europe. And of course that also goes to access to rights and integration measures for beneficiaries of international protection. Just think like simple things, going to kids being able to go to school, access to medical care, having work permits, etc. And now we're going to the second set of rules, the regulations. So the regulations are different than the directives that we have been discussing so far, because the regulations are mandatory and binding for the member states, and they don't have any room to move or postpone putting them in place, etc. So the regulations are stronger in a way European rules than the directives. And you can see here the Dublin regulation that we also discussed yesterday. The scope or the aim or the thinking behind Dublin was that there should not be asylum shopping. So someone that arrives in Europe, there should be a clear, straightforward system of which state is responsible for dealing with this asylum application. So they came up with the idea that the responsible state should be the state of the first entry. Of course, you cannot enter Europe, at least, let's say, the 95% of cases, you cannot enter Europe just by flying into Germany, let's say. You have to enter from the borders, which means that you will enter most of the times from south or east of Europe. And immediately that creates inequalities, because people entering, they have to be processed all at the same place, they have to be accommodated all at the same place. And it is not only creating problems on the burden sharing, as we were discussing yesterday, but it also creates reception problems and creates inequalities in the asylum systems, etc.